What links, if any, do you make between the Black Lives Matter / anarchist, communist, socialist movement, whatever you want to call it, that you see in America, and the fundamental Islamic movement?
There's an alliance there that has been very little noted and remarked upon, but it's very real. A few years back, before Black Lives Matter was all that widely known, it was actually during the Obama administration, if I recall correctly, Black Lives Matter operatives went to Gaza and got training from Palestinian terrorists as to how to carry out the kind of violence that we've been seeing in America over the last few months. And the Black Lives Matter movement, as a Marxist movement, avowedly so, in the words of its own leader, wants to destroy the United States as a free republic and establish an authoritarian state. Now that coincides 100% with the desire to destroy the United States and establish the caliphate, because they're both authoritarian states, and Islam doesn't have any problem coexisting with other authoritarian government arrangements, because it in itself lends itself to authoritarian rule. Turkey was the only democracy ever in the Islamic world, and that's on its way out now.
So could they ever be aligned as to the end result of such an overthrow?
Yeah, they sure could. In the Islamic Republic of Iran, Khomeini in 1979 allied with the communists and the Tudeh party. They thought that they could control him and get to power after the Shah was toppled with his help. But he ultimately turned on them and threw them all in prison or exiled or killed them. And it's probably the same thing in this case. The secular leftists don't have any idea of the power of the jihadist movement. Very few people do in the West. But this is something, as I said, they've been coming at us for 1,400 years. They're very patient. And if they suffer setbacks, it's never the end. They'll just come back later.
So they could work together on the overthrow, but then you're going to have a battle for control at that point. So, I used to watch Glenn Beck when he was on Fox, and then kept watching him a bit when he started The Blaze. And if I'm remembering correctly, he spoke about the socialists / communists and the fundamental Islamics Islamists working together to enter Europe and take over Europe. And people called him crazy at the time, but we're kind of seeing that type of thing going on now, aren't we?
Yes, no doubt about it. And this is an alliance that has a whole lot of many facets. We see, for example, in the United States, the Council on American Islamic Relations, which is a group that's been established by the Justice Department to be linked to Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood, according to a captured internal document that was discovered during a trial of an Islamic charity, the Holy Land Foundation, the Muslim Brotherhood is dedicated in the United States to, and I quote, eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house so that it falls and Allah's religion is victorious over other religions. Now, that is an imperative that you could just as easily put in the mouth of the Marxist, the Antifa types, the BLM, and so on. And CARE has expressed its solidarity in recent weeks with Black Lives Matter and encouraged Muslims to join in to the demonstrations.
How much is the Black Lives Matter movement, which again is Antifa and really this radical progressive communist movement, how much of it is really internationally derived?
Well, there's a lot of questions about their funding, but if you're talking about, when you have the head of Black Lives Matter saying we're Marxists, then they're saying they're internationalists, because Marxist is by its nature internationalist. It's a movement that believes that the nation state is a bourgeois concept that has to be swept away and the world united under the rule of the Marxist leadership, or whatever, the dictatorship of the proletariat. So we don't know how that translates. At least I don't know how that translates into their international funding. But I'm sure that they are, as a result of their avowed internationalism, tied to groups outside the United States that wish the country ill.
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing in Seattle and Portland and so on, I mean, isn't that kind of stuff happening in Europe also right now?
Yes, it is. Years ago, I was in Germany in 2011, and Antifa came to. We were having an outdoor rally, and I was speaking, and Antifa showed up and was throwing bottles and rocks and such at the stage, and socks full of manure and things. And the police did very little. They moved them back a little bit, but they were still able to throw all these things at us. One fellow said to me, I thought he was with our group, but it turned out he was Antifa. And he said to me, if it weren't for all these police around, you would be dead already. And they were in other words, active in Europe then. I experienced it. And now they have come to the United States.
And they're really brilliantly using this racial element. They've got lots of innocent Americans who don't really realize what they're supporting them.
Yes.
I'm just, before this interview, I was watching the NBA playoffs. They're on the court. Black Lives Matter. There's all the players wearing this, good thinking, good-hearted people are just thinking that, yeah, we'd like to, end racism in America and have everybody get along. They just don't realize how they're being used.
Yes. It's a terrible thing, really. The whole culture, the whole American body politic has been taken over by this group. I followed baseball for 49 years, but I didn't make it to 50 because they got too woke for me. You go to MLB.com and they've got this section, diversity and inclusion resources, and it's all this Marxist agitprop, Marxist propaganda that would destroy the United States if it were heeded and implemented. And they're putting it out there. Of course you understand. It's not that they're Marxists. They just want to play baseball and make a lot of money. But they know they can't do that in America today unless they pay obeisance to these groups, because otherwise their stadiums will go on fire. They'll be called racist. There'll be boycotts. And so that's...
well, there'll be a short-term reprieve, but ultimately these guys are coming for them. I mean, they're making too much money, yeah. Right? They're gonna take them over, and they're gonna take their money.
Yes.
You didn't earn it because you made it as a result of racism, and therefore don't deserve it. So Tim Cook, give it back. Zuckerberg, give it back. So these guys that are giving hundreds of millions of dollars to Black Lives Matter, they don't realize they're giving it to their enemy.
Yes. Well, the appeaser, was it Churchill who said the appeaser is the man who feeds the crocodile hoping it will eat him last? And that's what we see with these mega corporations and with the sports leagues and so on supporting Antifa and Black Lives Matter.
I remember reading The Looming Tower, which is a great book by Lawrence Wright. And he talked about, if I'm remembering the history of what started the Muslim Brotherhood, is that they were pointing to racism in America at that time as a basis for discrediting America and saying that America is not good. What is the link between how Islamic fundamentals have used racism versus what's being used today?
It's exactly the same thing. It's a long-standing strategy. It goes back to the 1940s, probably earlier than that. James Ford was the vice presidential candidate of the American Communist Party in, I believe it was 1940. And he was a Black American. And he spoke about how the intrinsic systemic racism in the American society was something that made Marxism the only answer. And he was trying to exacerbate those racial divisions. Now, of course, in those days, there really was racism in American society, but America is unique in the societies of the world in working for justice and overcoming all that. But the Marxist groups still want to exploit and worsen those racial divisions and to fan the flames of racial resentment, which they can use as corrosive of the existing societal arrangement and governmental arrangement, so that it ultimately falls and they can replace it with their own. And it's exactly the same strategy on the part of the Islamic Muslim Brotherhood groups.